national process platform called Vikalp Sangam in India, which is an alternatives confluence, and also help to coordinate the global tapestry of alternatives. And I'm speaking on behalf of the global tapestry today. We know that the kind of multiple global crises that we are in, whether it's the current health and economic one, or it's climate and biodiversity, or it's inequality, or many other such crises that we're facing, that the roots of these crises are in the kind of structures and relations of power, whether it is old ones like patriarchy and racism, or the ones that we all face like state domination, capitalism, and many others here in India, casteism, many other forms of oppression, unsustainability, inequality. And it's really addressing these roots, these structures and relations of the concentration of power, that which is where we seek our answers. And we have also seen that these structures have created this myth of development, which in most of our countries has come in forms of violence, where extremely violently both nature and communities are uprooted from their lands, from their forests, from their waters, and dispossessed of the means of livelihoods all across the world. We also see that economic development in the globalization has created enormous vulnerability amongst hundreds of millions of people, as we see with the current COVID crisis. And so therefore, the movements of resistance against this kind of global capture of nature, natural resources, and people's livelihoods, the dispossession of people and their livelihood resources, the movements of resistance right now, for instance, in India, over the last 8 months, we have seen this amazing movement of farmers sitting on the streets for the last 8 months and refusing to budge with their demand that the kind of corporatization and commercialization and corporate capture of agriculture that this government is allowing should be withdrawn. We're seeing similar movements, of course, all over the world, including what previous speakers spoke about, anti-racism movements, climate justice movements, the anti-extractivist movements, the movements for gender justice, and so on. And here in India, one of the terms that became quite famous during our independence struggle was Satyagraha, which Mahatma Gandhi coined, which was essentially speaking truth to power. We're seeing these movements all over the world. But along with this, and what we try and focus on is the movements for radical alternatives, for constructive alternatives, for meeting people's needs and aspirations without destroying the earth and without creating the kind of injustices that we are seeing. We are seeing hundreds of thousands of places in the world where these alternative practices, economic practices such as solidarity economy, non-profit cooperatives, worker-run production systems, consumer movements, agroecology, food sovereignty, energy sovereignty, decentralized water harvesting. And along with all of this, also, of course, the attempts at trying to deepen democracy much more than it is right now, where people are asserting that democracy is not about elections, it's about us claiming power where we are, radical forms or direct forms of democracy or of self-determination, of autonomy and freedom. So it's practices of this kind which are also based on radical alternative worldviews, many of them coming from ancient times, such as here in India, a worldview called Swaraj, which means self-rule with responsibility, the Buin Vivir and Sumak Kause and so on from South America, Ubuntu, yes, and many others
there is
from Africa.
No time. If you
I'll finish in half a minute, yes. Is that it's based on all of this that we are actually seeing the kind of greater collaborations taking place all across the world based on a respect for diversity, a respect for this kind of self-determination and the commons, and human rights is also the rights of nature. So I end by saying that for us, it's very important that we are part of these sorts of dialogues and discussions through the global tapestry of alternatives. We have tried to create a platform in which the Global Dialogue for Systemic Change and many others are part of this increasing dialogue and collective actions. It's joint actions that we take across the world that will hopefully offer us the possibility of both challenging the current system and working towards much more just and sustainable processes all over the world. So we offer to continue collaborating on that. Thank you very much again for the opportunity.
Thank you.
Allora, grazie mille Ashish. Continuiamo in questo nostro racconto insieme e torniamo al 1996, quando a Roma, al vertice della FAO sullo Stato mondiale del cibo, i contadini arrivano a decidere un nuovo paradigma di democrazia e di codecisione dei processi di produzione ma anche di distribuzione del cibo, per cui coniano il paradigma della sovranità alimentare. Questa storia, che è una storia di tante donne e tanti uomini, noi ce la facciamo raccontare da Morgano D, che è della Confédération Paysanne Française ed è un membro della Via Campesina Europea, con la quale in questi anni abbiamo lavorato proprio per far sì che questa tessitura, che questa nostra capacità di interpretare il paradigma democratico a partire dalla terra fosse uno degli elementi sui quali costruire con forza le nostre alternative. Grazie Morgana.
Hello, thank you very much for the invitation. My name is Morgan Odi. I am a peasant farmer in Brittany, France, and I am a member of the coordinating committee of the European coordination Via Campesina. La Via Campesina is celebrating this year 25 years of the idea of food sovereignty, which indeed we developed during the World Food Summit in '96. Since Via Campesina was created, we never ended to struggle against neoliberal trade policies, which place the interest of transnational companies agreements on investment and against bilateral free trade agreements. And we have had some success. The transnational companies are now taking advantage of the pandemic in order to launch a new they are attacking us at the level of international governance in developing the concept of multi-stakeholderism against multilateralism. They are trying to take the power over some UN processes, including the UN Food System Summit. This is the reason why we are boycotting this summit. Forum has taken advantage of the criminalization of social movements all over the world via laws against social struggles, forbidding demonstrations, and general laws against people's freedom. Third, they are attacking us at the level of the discourse that they have on environmental issues. Some years ago, transnational companies were on a defensive to a very offensive discourse, presenting themselves as the only power to face and to find solution against environmental crisis. They propose only technological solution. At the agricultural level, they push very strongly for new GMOs, digitalization of agriculture, and lab or cellular meat. And this attack is clearly directed against peasant agroecology, against food sovereignty, and against the relocalization of agriculture. So we are in a very difficult situation for farmers' movement. Pandemic also prevented us to meet with each other, to organize, and most of the peasants all over the world had to concentrate on their survival, and also as the criminalization of social struggle was very, very strong. And also we are very much fragilized by the false alternative between national populism and neoliberalism, which both are based on authoritarianism. One is protecting the interest of national elites, and the other one of world elite. So facing all this, it is more than ever necessary to carry together an alternative, a desirable world. This world that we can collectively desire is based on well living and on social justice, to oppose to consumerism and the project of an infinite growth. And of course, it is based on struggling against social inequalities. This desirable world is based on relocalizing both economically and at a democratic level. But we want this relocalization to not be a closing of identities. We want it to be a relocalization of internationalism. And finally, and this should be based on struggling for an international recognition of food sovereignty. So, as a conclusion, it's time not only to resist against the attacks from the World Economic Forum and transnational companies, but also for us to move back to be offensive as well. Because facing the disaster that is built by capitalism, the world that we want to build is the only one that carries some hope. Thank you very much.
Le persone sono tenute in container sulla frontiera di Claviere e Monginevro. È nato un movimento che dal 2018 ha occupato la chiesa di Claviere, il sottochiesa di Claviere, dove è riuscito a fare un rifugio autogestito che ha resistito 6 mesi. Sono stati fatti vari passamontagna su su quella montagna, su quel pezzo di montagna che collega. Sì, abbiamo 3 minuti, quindi un attimo, poi grazie. No, molto gentile, però sono stati fatti vari passamontagna tra quella frontiera in cui la gendarmeria ha capito che c'è qualcuno che comunque.
The people have understood that is sort of monitoring what we're doing. In the past, they used to take away the documents. Well, that shelter was evacuated when for 2.5 years, there was a small house which was occupied where people that were passing by could fight together with us. That home has been evacuated as well. There is still a group which is resisting up there in the mountains, which has created since in 2 days, from the 22nd to the 26th, they think they can cross the border together. You're invited. It's an unauthorized camping at 1,800 meters. You need to have a tent and you want to join this self-organized camping. So from the 22nd to the 20th, you want the information, passamontagna.info, and then you go to come with us and we try to cross the border. More sessions. Also, we'll have to have a small group at the end, and then we'll all go together. We enable Morgan to close her remarks. She was interrupted when she was talking about the proposals from women farmers for next year. Can you reactivate the video and start with the conclusions from Audrey? Thank you for your patience.
Yes, thank you.
Well, a lot of people, so it's difficult. Thank you.
Sorry, I don't know exactly where I was cut, but the main point was to say that we have on a very strong attacks from the transnational companies right now, and for peasant farmers, the situation is particularly difficult. But facing this situation, we really need to ourselves as well to pass on a more offensive mode and to propose a more desirable world based on well living, social justice, and relocalization, both economical and democratic. And one of the things that we really want to focus on neoliberal trade policies, but also to really strongly propose something else, which could maybe be an international treaty for food sovereignty. So I thank you very much, and we are looking forward to continue working with all other social movements in the world. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much, Morgan, for being with us and for the testimony that you gave. And I give the floor to the next speaker from Austria. She's from a network. They have sort of established this network as they've done with the Society for the Care. They've turned to the national level and the international level to get further support to try and sort of define some rules. We are working with them against the European trade agenda. So I'd like to ask her to focus on this in her remarks. So thank you so much.
Hello, everybody. Thanks for the invitation. It's an honor to be here, and it's super exciting to pick up all the fights that the global justice movement has been having for the last 20 years there. And it's amazing to see how much the liberal trade agenda has been a hotspot for questioning the mainstream of this neoliberal development system, and how many fights have been fought, how many fights have been won, others that have not been. And still, of course, nonetheless, we are looking at an expansion of the system, and especially now coming out of the pandemic, this is a solution that has been or is been proposed to us as a way out of the economic crisis that we're facing so far. And that we're going to face in the future. However, I want to draw upon some of the successes that we've had, or some of the things that we can be proud of and that we should strengthen. And one of it is movement building. So we're very happy to see how many topics, how many groups, how many struggles do come together in this fight against the neoliberal trade agenda. And especially these days, we can proudly say that we have been connecting to the climate justice movement that has been so strong on the streets over the last couple of years. And there we have two very interesting examples. One that is the EU-Mercosur agreement, where we're especially looking at joining Fridays for Future and other groups in the fight for the protection of the Amazon, which will be highly under distress if this treaty comes to life. The Amazon is already under a lot of stress, of course, by this neoliberal system, and the EU-Mercosur treaty would make that much, much, much worse. So there we have had many successful action days, Twitter campaigns and others with the climate justice movement, and this connection is becoming stronger and stronger, which is amazing. Another example is the Energy Charter Treaty, where we're working with different groups to end this treaty that proportionally more supports the fossil fuel industry, where big companies can sue countries like the Netherlands if they want to exit their coal power plants. And this is a fight that has been going on and has been going very well. And we're very proud to see how much movement building and connection to movements on the street have happened there. And then, of course, there is the newest, biggest challenge of this pandemic, where we're also seeing that a lot of connection is happening, a lot of movement building is happening. We're working more and more with the global health movement and showing the trade-related issues that are there, which are, of course, at the WTO and the TRIPS agreement. And this pandemic is showing us exactly the weaknesses that this neoliberal system proposes to us, right? But it also gives us this chance to build new alliances and to also more proactively show what are our alternatives. What does the new reality look like? We do not want to go back to the old reality. We need to shape a new reality. And this is something that we're currently very strongly working at, that goes slowly, that is super difficult, but that has shown super interesting chances also through the movement building. And then, of course, this gives us more ideas on how we can come back together stronger and show our common goals and visions, because there's so many topics that we are all working on. There's so many things that we can unite against, or that visions that we want to show. And this is something that we should definitely do. The climate movement, for example, is doing 2 big strike days each year, where so many people and so many groups come together and show their solidarity, show their struggle, show their visions for the world. And this is something that we can do for so many different topics, that we can do for the topics that are hottest now, but that we should also do more for topics that are not so much on the agenda, that are more difficult to talk about, like, for example, digitalization or food sovereignty. But this is where we all come together, and these are opportunities that we should use more.
Teresa? Yeah, we are back. Sorry, but we have some problems with the. Okay. Teresa?
Yes,
Teresa? Yes.
I'm here.
You can speak if you want.
Okay. I'm not sure where I lost you now, but I think one of the main messages to take away is kind of an idea how we see that the the climate justice movement, for example, is having these amazing mobilization days twice a year, from which we can learn a lot on how to have common days of action, on how to bring the topics on the street, and how we maybe can do that more precisely and push the topics that we are all working for more strongly, and be less about it's climate justice day twice a year, but it can be food sovereignty day, it can be fair digitalization days. So this is an idea where we can fight the fragmentation that's been going on, fight the situation that we've been moved into by all these bilateral trade agreements that make it more difficult for us to fight on a global level. But we definitely do have these global topics that we can unite against, and find more common activities, and find more points of intervention where we can show how necessary the change is and how successful also we've been. This is one last thing that I would like to see more, that we can celebrate ourselves for the things and the fights that have been won, and how especially the anti-free trade movement has made it so successful to question the mainstream that otherwise is being pushed forward by Democrats at the WTO. I think that's, I hope you heard the most important parts now. Thank you so much. I'll give back.
Thank you. Thank you.
E tra l'altro,
Edmilson, un minuto e tiene che hablar.
Collegato alla importanti. Io vado subito, diciamo, a passare la parola.
I'll give the floor to Rodriguez. It's a point of reference, an important protagonist. He was a mayor of Bethlehem. He was in Genoa. He was a major protagonist in terms of citizens' participation. Edmilson is still the mayor of Belém, and is a point of reference in that next summer there will be a forum for the Amazon in Belém, and the movements for the Amazon are having a role of vital importance on the struggle for the Amazon. So I give the floor to Belém, and I thank him for being with us today. Comrades, first of all, let me thank you for your invitation to address this assembly of the anti-capitalist movements in Europe and the world. I want to pay tribute to Carlo Giuliani, who 20 years ago died in Genoa, fighting for a better world. 20 years ago, as a mayor of the city of Belém from the Brazilian Amazon, I had come to Genoa because of the World Social Forum who had taken place in our city. We had organized the Pan-Amazon World Forum in my own city, and we wanted to join with the forces in Europe that were fighting for a possible and better world. To defeat capitalism and globalization. Capitalism generates oppression, inequalities. We've gone through difficult times where people were desperate and they were sort of hoping own country. What happened? Our country lives in great poverty with the death which is looming over 500,000 people dead because of the pandemic. Well, these victims could have been cured in most cases, but the government has caricatured the virus, has fought against the vaccines, and the end effect was a humanitarian catastrophe. But even what we learned a lesson from plague, and pandemic has shown clearly that what makes us human is solidarity. This very strong feeling makes it all the more necessary to sort of meet with other movements that are fighting for our own ideals. Once again, from Genoa, we heard your call. We're ready. We're ready to pick up where we left in our fight in our city from the 20th to the 23rd of October. We have organized a meeting for the Amazon to deal with the dramatic changes which are occurring there. It will bring together all the people with the sort of traditional knowledge in the Amazon and scientists that wish to exchange views on climate change and how to sort of deal with climate change. Well, we will prepare a document at the end of the meeting that will be spread during the conference of the climate. But this is just one phase of a journey that we're going to carry out towards the Pan-Amazon World Social Forum that will be taking place in July. This is going to be organized in Belém. So we'll pick up from there to create a front of the peoples of the Amazon that should march united with the brothers and sisters from all other continents to protect and defend the Amazons and the peoples of the Amazon. Well, so I want to extend to you all the invitation to join us there, and hopefully we will meet next year in Belém so that together we can, across the Atlantic, create a global rebellion against the poverty, inequalities, biases, and the killing of nature. Brothers and sisters, let's carry on, move on in the pathway of Genoa. Thank you very much. Thank you. On the issue on the Amazon Forum, which will take place next year, considering the important role played by the Amazon movements in the defense of the planet. We'll move now from Brazil to Europe. Climate is not simply related to the increased CO2 concentrations. There are a number of phenomena which are cross-cutting in terms of climate change. They are they threaten the common goods. And they also threaten the right to access to common goods such as water. We have a comrade from the European Water Movement. Many movements are movements that have been fighting for water. So I think that Paolo is the most knowledgeable person to discuss about common goods and the role of the struggle for common goods in fighting against climate change. Thank you. Can you hear me? Yes, we can. I'll speak a mixture of Italian and Spanish. First of all, thank you for your invitation to this meeting. Sorry, I hear an echo. Shall I carry on? I'm speaking on behalf of the movement, of European Movement for Water. We are a founding member of the European Movement for Water. Now, a sister organization at international level is very active on this front at international level. The European Movement for Water, it's a network of movements, of campaigns and trade unions, from other countries, Greece, Portugal, that was set up following the process of the European Social Forum, the first joint declaration on water that we have issued all together has given rise to the European Movement for Water. That was in 2008. Still in the framework of work done by European Social Fora and mobilization against globalization. So what we're missing is the regular meetings that we used to have with other organizations at European level. So that's very important for us to be part of this meeting online so that we can try and reconstruct a network and a calendar of meetings to restore a dynamic that we used to have 20 years ago, 10 years ago, after the 2008 crisis has died out. As the European Movement for Water, we have participated to all the European and World Social Fora, Florence Plus 10. We're also a member of the Alter Summit. We've also hosted and participated to alternative fora on water against the forum, which is organized by multinational corporations in Marseille, in Brasilia, etc. Over the last 10, 15 years, our organizations as a network have organized a referendum on water in Italy in 2011, 10 years ago. We've also stopped the privatization of water resources in Greece, They were very active in the processes in Paris, in Portugal, in Germany. They've organized mass protests in Rwanda 6 years ago. We also stopped privatization and changes to the system for water management in Ireland. Now we mobilized in Spain, in Serbia, and elsewhere. So, as I said, this is up and running as a network, which is operating at national level, at local level, the regional level, at international level. So to us, this sort of encounter is of fundamental importance. We carry on with our work. COVID showed how important it is to have access to water for everyone, for every citizen. We know that in Europe now, 8 million people in Europe have no access to drinkable water, drinking water. So that there are 8 million people that are at the risk for exclusion. We have a country such as the Netherlands. As I said, this is a very important problem, which is getting even more serious for environmental issues. We've seen last week what happened in Germany, in Belgium, etc. We keep saying there is no life without water. We can't allow water to be privatized or listed in the stock exchange, as happened last year in the United States. We feel that we all need to two, 3, or 4 times a year. To us, this is of vital importance. European movement for water was launched at a European encounter 10 years ago in Naples. The purpose of the movement is to connect hundreds of national, local movements to fight against desertification, to promote public property of water resources. But we know that water is not an isolated problem. We look hopefully to the demonstration about the essential resources. Our appeal here is to try and here and now. Because it can talk in terms of referring to public services, the environment. Us to win the war for water, Cochabamba and other places in the world. So the planet needs that. The COP30 in Glasgow should be a unique opportunity to establish bonds with other movements and create
This is a further step of interconnection between the various lobbies with a different look. We do not want to look to the past, but rather to the future. We want to have an international look and to see how we can pool our resources, our efforts. We have Asad Renan. Asad is the Director of Water One, which is one of the most important British association which deals with social rights.
And as you heard, we work with frontline communities and social movements all around the world on the root causes of injustice, inequality, and climate crisis. For decades, all of us have taken an intersectional and an anti-imperialist lens to the multiple crises we face. We've tried to weave our stories and our solutions together, as we did 20 years ago on the streets of Genoa. And what we predicted has come about. We are no longer at a crossroads in human history. We are now standing on the edge of catastrophe, when the very question of life hangs in the balance. Even now, amongst the elites, the attempts to promote the illusion that the neoliberal system has not pushed us to the brink of catastrophe is hard to sustain. Everyone can see that our already broken world has fractured even further in this last year. The corona pandemic has been an X-ray on our societies and between our societies, exposing all the deep racial, gendered, economic and social inequalities that exist. And of course, it's now hard to escape the realities of the climate crisis. Just in this 1 week, we've seen killer floods in India, Germany, Uganda. We've seen heat waves in North America. We have seen temperatures hotter than a human being can withstand in Pakistan. We've seen famines in Madagascar, and we've seen temperatures of 38 degrees in the Arctic. That is, of course, the poorest. And yet, despite hot air by rich governments, all the countless summits of leaders, we are heading towards a catastrophic warming of the planet of 3 degrees or even more. A decade ago, many of us, were fighting to limit temperatures to below 1 degree, arguing that no temperature increase is safe and that it's deadly for many. Today, our call for 1.5 to barely stay alive is being met with rich countries ignoring the science, and they're banking on technologies that don't even exist to be able to dial down the temperature once it's gone up and to be able to suck hundreds of billions of carbon from the atmosphere. Genocidal net zero 2050. Sorry, getting a bit of feedback, sorry. So as our call, of course, has never been just to reduce emissions. It's always been a call to reduce injustice. Sorry?
Yeah. We can speak. Sorry for the, yeah.
Okay. Our call has never been just to reduce emissions. It's always been a call to reduce injustice, to address the permanent crisis faced by the global south and the poorest in the global north. From the corona pandemic, the existing crisis of neoliberal inequality and the global recession, the crisis of racism and patriarchy, but also the legacy of racialized and gendered capitalism that has enriched the global north.
Ashad, sorry, if you can restart, because sorry.
No problem, brother. Do you want me to start from the beginning, or no? Just from where I am now.
Yes, please. Yes, please. Yeah.
Okay. Our call is not. Thank you. Our call is not to just reduce emissions. It's a call to reduce injustice, to address the permanent crisis faced by the global south and the poorest in the global north.
From the beginning, your intervention from the beginning, thank you.
Okay. All right. Happy to start again. So I just want to thank you all for the opportunity to join you and bring you solidarity greetings from War on Want. My name is Asad Rahman, represent War on Want, and we work with frontline communities and social movements around the world on the root causes of injustice, inequality, and the climate crisis. For decades, all of us have taken an intersectional and an anti-imperialist lens to the multiple crises we face. We've tried weaving our stories and our solutions together, as we did on the streets of Genoa 20 years ago. And what we predicted has come about. We are no longer at crossroads in human history. We stand on the edge of catastrophe, when the very question of life hangs in the balance. Even amongst elites, the attempt to promote the illusion that the neoliberal system has not pushed us to the brink of catastrophe is hard to sustain. We've seen the set of capital further in this last year. The corona pandemic has been an X-ray on our societies and between our societies, exposing all of its deep racial, gendered, economic and social inequalities. And of course, it's hard to escape the realities of the climate crisis. Just in this 1 week alone, we've seen killer floods in India, Germany, Uganda. We've seen heat waves in North America. We've seen temperatures hotter than a human being can tolerate in Pakistan. We've seen famines in Madagascar, and we've seen temperatures of 38 degrees in the Arctic. It's also hard to escape the reality now that this has been caused by the richest and one whose price is paid by the poorest. Yet despite all of the hot air, the countless summits of leaders, we're heading towards a catastrophic warming of 3 degrees or more. Now, many of us a decade ago were fighting to limit temperatures to below 1 degree, arguing no temperature increase is safe and it's deadly for many. Today, our call for 1.5 to barely stay alive is being met by rich countries ignoring the science, ignoring equity, and banking on technologies that don't even exist to be able to suck out hundreds of billions of tons of carbon from the atmosphere at some point in the future. Justice to address the permanent crisis of neoliberalism. Also the legacy of racialized and gendered capitalism that has enriched the global north at the expense of the global south, of unfair trade rules and corporate greed, of rich countries insisting poorer countries privatize their vital public services to hand over control of their food and their energy systems to big business. We live in a world where despite the abundance of wealth, half of the world's population still struggles to survive on less than the equivalent of $5.50 a day, where half lack access to electricity and clean cooking, billions face issues of hunger, like housing, public services, access to fresh water, where even the UN and the Special Rapporteur says we are creating a climate apartheid where the rich will seek safety whilst leaving the poor to die. So our goal is not being just to shift away from fossil fuels, but it's actually to say, make the call that food, energy, water are public goods that need to be shared equitably and not for exploitation by big business. Of making calls that everyone has a right to a dignified life, that living wages, social protection, health, education, and housing must be a fundamental right. That our call for action has to connect the struggles in our workplaces and our communities, both from the local, national, to the global level, where we ask ourselves that question again, what is our economy for? And what does a just transition really mean? And how do we build a care economy of the future? We all know this is the time now is not only to be bold and radical, but it's to actually make sure we anchor our vision in justice and connect our solutions commensurate to the multiple crises facing us. And that, of course, requires us to be internationalist in scope. There's no solutions that can retreat behind the walls of the nation state. They have to be global and they have to be universal. That's why we have helped set up the COP26 coalition that is explicitly rooted in climate justice and stands with the global South movements. Why we're working with more social movements from all around the world to develop a global Green New Deal, demands that are global in nature, but that connect our fights on economic, social, and political and climate justice. Where we know that the need for change doesn't come just from having a vision of the world we want to create, or even having the transformational demands that spell out what we want, what we mean when we say system change, not climate change. It also recognizes that fundamental question: how do we build our power? How do we build our collective power as social movements, so that no longer can we fight in our silos, but that we fight our issues one by one? Now, there are huge opportunities for us. On one hand, we've seen rich governments, particularly in the global north, ripping up the rule book of neoliberalism and austerity. They've directly intervened into their economies, invested in public services, funded retention schemes, and of course, still handed out their biggest bailouts, 13 trillion to big business rather than people. But there is a growing realization, even amongst citizens of the global north, of the importance of public services, of tackling low pay. And so when governments are discussing now and packages to rebuild their economy, that provides us an opportunity to say we don't want to build back. We want to be able to dial forward to something better. And there is hope, because if we look around the world, be it in Chile, our social movements in Chile, be it in India with the farmers' protests, be it in Sudan, Algeria, the Black Lives Matter protests, the youth climate strikers, there are new movements, new social movements emerging, all asking that fundamental question about a vision to an alternative to neoliberalism and our broken economy. It's said that neoliberalism's biggest crime was it stole the ability of people to imagine and dream. And there are some in our progressive circles who've internalized those values and said, well, there's nothing that we can do about from tinker around the edges. Nothing came before the market, nothing will come after it. It's the end of history. But we know different. And that's the spirit of Genoa that we have to take forward and reconnect our movements, reweave our stories together and build and rebuild our internationalist social movements in a network that doesn't just say, here's a critique of what's going on, but has the demands to build a power and collective power and our ability to be able to act together to change the world for better. Thank you.
Thank you. The watchword, the slogan, which has been promoted by the social movement fighting for climate change, is to try and intervene on the contradictions of the system, changing the system, not just fighting against climate change. In Italy, we have many experiences, many persons that are involved in this type of struggle. We have Fridays for Future. We have Martina Comparelli from Fridays for Future. They are working very hard in view of the pre-COP30 meeting in Milan. So I give you the floor, Martina. Thank you for inviting Fridays for Future. We're very happy to enter into a dialogue with many other realities on the occasion of the 20th anniversary of Genoa. There is a red thread which connects all the demands that were put forward at the time of Genoa. We see that there is this cross-cutting element in all the requests and demands put forward by the movements. Our strike on the 24th will show that all these crises are intertwined. They cannot be considered separately. Climate crisis, up to a point, is of a scientific nature, but it's a very political crisis. There are all sorts of forms of exploitation and oppression which affect mostly those that are